was born in Monroe, Louisiana, on January the 24th, in the prime year of 1938.
Where do you think your first, like, harsh exposure to racism was?
I can remember it distinctly. And surprisingly, I do view it as racism, but it doesn't involve blacks.
Hmm.
What I remember is we flew in from Columbia into Miami airport,
Mm-hmm.
and of course in the Miami airport we got off, went through customs, and then we proceeded to a hotel in Miami. And I remember my mother checking into the hotel, and there was a sign up on the counter of the hotel, and it said restricted.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her, what does that mean? And she glared at me. That means keep your mouth shut. So
Yeah.
I didn't say anymore.
Yeah.
Later I asked her, what does that mean? And she said that means no Jews allowed.
Oh, really?
You're saying, what is the narrative in school?
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of the fact that there were no black people or colored people of any kind in the classroom?
Yeah, like, what did they say about that? What was the sort of narrative they spun?
It was not discussed.
Hmm.
It seems kind of strange, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
as I look back on it and I try to puzzle through that, because it would be an obvious topic of discussion, wouldn't it? Why aren't there any
Black people
different
here.
colored people here?
Yeah.
You know? My guess is because the teachers really didn't want to discuss it, and the students didn't think about it. It was kind of like it was the norm, and do you question the norm at that age?
Yeah. Sure.
I mean,
So, nobody was like, it wasn't super common to see, like, people being, like, super racist on a day-to-day basis, but it was more like people just sort of let the racism slide a little bit and accepted it as a norm.
Well, I think people were super racist on a day-to-day basis in the mere fact that they accepted the situation.
Yeah. Okay.
In other words, they found it as quote-unquote normal.
Right.
It was perfectly normal for black people to live in the black part of town. I mean, you had a black part of town, and that's where they lived, and God help them if they chose to try to live outside of that.
Right.
It just didn't happen. So, but that was accepted as a standard, and as I look back on, I have to say that's pretty damn racist to say that's the standard.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's just something that it's embarrassing for me to say it wasn't questioned, because I'd like to be a hero and say I stood on a box top and questioned it, but I really never did.
Yeah.
It was only as I was a senior in high school, much later, not as a youngster, but much later, that I began to instinctively question it.
There's one, like, really big thing that I wanted to talk to you about, that I think would be really interesting for, the whole, like, class to hear about. So, from the beginning to the end, tell me the whole, like, KKK cross-burning story.
And I happened to be teaching in Jackson, Mississippi, and I think it was 63. But anyway, that was the summer of Medgar Evers. I don't know if you've ever heard of Medgar Evers, but he was the head of the Mississippi NAACP, president of it. He was a national leader of the civil rights movement, and he was assassinated in Jackson, Mississippi, in the summer that I was there. And that was the summer also where they rounded up so many of the protesters. Well, it's been so long, I don't remember, but they had these barriers and they used cattle prods on them, electric cattle prods on protesters. And those were used, of course, for cows and bulls. So it had a hell of a charge. It would hurt, I'm sure. But it was a terrible summer. just terrible in terms of that kind of activity. There were demonstrations and semi-riots, but mostly the riots were not caused by the demonstrators, but rather by the people watching the demonstrators and cursing them and attacking them in several cases. In fact, the police claimed that they rounded up the demonstrators to protect them. Well, that's a crock. I taught at a college called Millsaps College. It's really quite a fine college. But as always, I was interested in some extra money. And there was a black college there called Marshall, as I recall, Marshall College. And they said, well, they wanted me to teach night school. It was a black college. And I said, I'd be happy to teach one course, you know. It was a great way to pick up some extra money. And it was at night, and we're watching TV, and all of a sudden, Bill was looking, he was in a couch that was looking out the living room window, and he said, oh shit. I said, what? He said, look, and there was a cross. It was a giant cross that he made. There was a cross out there, and it was burning. Yeah. And they were yelling out there, let's see, the favorite expression was nigger lover. That was it. That was a favorite expression. But that was that. And so after that experience, I didn't teach there anymore.
I can imagine.
I decided the better part of valor was not to get the money.
Yeah. So, do you remember any like strong opinions from the people around you? Like, did you have like pro-segregation and anti-segregation people in your life, or was it like?
I can't recall one in my life who was not a pro-segregationist, wanted to keep segregation. In fact, they used to say, if this happens, you know, the world is coming to an end. We'll fight to the bitter end. You know, people kind of get a little melodramatic, but there was no one that I can ever recall in my life who was anything other than for segregation, 100%. This was in probably 1962. But a friend of hers was passing, and she and I had gone to the hospital. She stayed in his room, and I went out. I was catching the elevator going downstairs, and an orderly was there, a black orderly. As we were waiting for the elevator to come up, the elevator came up, and the doors opened, and off the elevator came this stunningly beautiful nurse. I mean, she was just stunning, you know. I mean, I was, And so he and I got on the elevator, and I looked over at him, and I said, man, she is gorgeous. He said, yeah, and we both realized we'd crossed the cultural barrier. That's something. I'm a white man saying to a black man, look at that beautiful white woman. You talk about a no-no of major, major proportions. It shocked him. It shocked me when I realized what I had done to him, put him in a bad position, as well as myself. And we both just clammed up. We looked down at the at the floorboard of the elevator. Never said a word again until the doors opened and left. But I'll never forget that. It was you had to understand that black people were killed for looking at a white woman. That was one of the great no-nos. And there I was. I put him in a position of saying, "Hey, ain't she beautiful?" And the fact that he answered meant that he at that second in time, he had dropped the barrier himself. We were both just two people. And then all of a sudden, both of us almost simultaneously realized, oh my God. There are instances like that. It was it was not a good time. It was not. It was not good. The South had a lot of fine things about it, but the whole the whole thing of racism was a disaster for everyone, for the white people, for the black people. It was just a disaster. More so for the black, obviously, but still a disaster. That's the reason I got out of there as soon as I could.